Good evening, and it is Sunday night, and I'd like to continue with our standard practice of reviewing last week's discussion and readings and materials, and give you a preview of what's going on this week, and also just make some general comments about the course. First, my apologies for what seems to be a little bit of a technical problem in getting started early this week. I guess some of the discussion boards didn't appear promptly. For some reason, they got switched off, so that maybe held people up for a few hours in getting going. That I was able to get fixed right away. So thank you for your patience, and didn't seem to dampen the enthusiasm with which everybody jumped in. And as I mentioned in writing a few moments ago, this is one of the early discussion boards where it almost seems that every time I do this, I really don't have to do too much with it, and you'll notice that I didn't. You guys did a great job. You did a great job of talking to each other about some very interesting things, and it's where we have to come to the realization of that age-old question that seems to come up every time around. Is sport a business, or is it something else, or do our passions for it cloud our perceptions of it as a business? People are answering a lot of different ways. You know, some people talked about the philosophy of being a capitalist system, and no, you shouldn't regulate profits. That sounds more like socialism. Yes, we should regulate profits, and that maintains balance, and we'll come to that in a later unit when we talk a lot about competitive balance and what do leagues do, and how important is it for a team to make money. There are all sorts of things that go on. This is one of the ones where it's really sometimes hard to kind of sublimate our passions as sports fans for our logical sense as business students. And that's really what we have to do. And I think people did a great job. I really appreciate the back and forth, the way people question each other and answer and critically read and then respond specifically to somebody else's post. That really shows a lot of respect for the other individual. And polite disagreement is a pleasure to read in a discussion. That's really what it is about. That's why I say we are here to learn from each other. And I think this last week's discussion was great on that. Personally, I didn't jump in, but I will tell you my opinion is no, I don't think the leagues should regulate the profits of the individual members, but I think leagues do a lot of other things. We will be looking at how leagues operate in a little more in depth. In fact, there is some material this week which looks at a little bit more of the legal side and the labor issues side and the whole idea of antitrust. Antitrust, as you know, is an anti-monopoly terminology, a legal terminology where we don't have one company or one group of companies dominate an industry, but isn't that exactly what happens in big-time sports? And this goes way back into the early 20th century when Major League Baseball got an exemption from the antitrust laws. And the key language used then by the legal profession was it wasn't a business, it was a public exhibition. Kind of splitting hairs? I don't know, but take a look at some of the stuff. It goes back a few years, 6 or 7 years, some of it really when we talk about the last big problems we had with labor issues in the NFL. Remember the players went on strike about 7 years ago, or actually they were locked out. That was a big issue. And people are talking about labor problems coming up in the NFL in a year or so when the next collective bargaining agreement runs out. And it's the battle we keep hearing about, you know, the millionaires versus the billionaires. What does this mean? Is this really something that we can wrap our heads around? I think you're going to find it very interesting. The other thing I noted this week, too, is that we can't seem to get through any discussion right now and anything we talk about without having some mention of the NCAA. And I'm just fresh back literally today from being down in Orlando, Florida, in the middle of a total immersion in Division II college sports. As I mentioned, I coached the post men's tennis team, and we were down there on our spring break trip, and both training and competing, and 4 matches. A good week. Ended with a really super good win over Eckerd College, which is something we've been trying to pull off for 3 or 4 years now. Finally did. So on the competitive side, I'm proud of that. But back to business. You can see the effort and the money that goes into just Division II sports and the battles to keep that going. Well, how does that get financed? Well, a lot of it gets financed out of what you're all watching on TV this week, which is the Division I men's tournament. So, excuse me. I also included in the opening announcement a link to a PowerPoint presentation. You may have to expand it a little bit when you read it. That was done, I think, in 2016 by a presentation to the NCAA board and to the NCAA, some of the NCAA's constituents about where does the money go in Division I. There are a lot of misconceptions about how the NCAA makes and spends money. And remember, the NCAA is a not-for-profit organization, so it has to work in different ways. And I think there's a lot of different misconceptions. On the other hand, going back to the whole idea of franchise and competitiveness, I heard as I was watching the end of one of the games on, I believe it was Friday night, and Coach Kelvin Sampson of Houston made a really interesting comment at the end of that game that really struck home to me. The interviewer was congratulating him on winning the game, and he was talking about the commitment that his university and his administration had made to rebuilding the basketball program there at Houston. Remember, that's a fairly storied program going back to way back in my era to Elvin Hayes, and then after that the Phi Slamma Jamma that people may have heard about, and the famous upset that North Carolina State pulled against them in the finals. But that's the athletic history. But Coach Sampson made a really, really, I think, profound remark. He said, coaches win games, administrations win championships. Stop and think about that. Really struck home to me as to how the allocation and commitment of a university to its success on the field is reflected. Excuse me, I've got a bit of a cold here. And maybe that's the same in the organization in the front office at the professional level wins championships. The coaches on the field and players on the field win games. Very interesting take on things. So everything is, I think you're going to find some more interesting stuff. Please take the time to go through it and ask any questions. I did get the grading up for everyone that I managed to squeeze in. I try to, as you'll notice, give everybody an individual comment on what you did well and what you should do better. very, excuse me, please. And I'll continue that more. Gets a little tougher week by week. That was a great opening week we had in the week one stuff. I see it continue and spill over into week two, and I have to say that I'm very pleased with that. So please keep up the good work. I will be back in the office all of this week. I'm back from spring break. In fact, we don't compete and travel again until next Saturday, and so that'll give me a little bit more time this week. And if you have any questions, please raise them. But the interchange, the back and forth between everyone, the way you've handled the discussion has been really great. And I think this is pointing towards a very successful class. So thank you very much.